talked about it in letters, and we talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, irresponsible opinions about classic film, the 176,000th or so most popular podcast in the world.
Big news.
What do you think about that, Dave? I'm Elise. Did I get the math right on that? I think Listen Notes said that...
We're in the top 10 percentile.
But we're right at the bottom. So the thing is, what you need to do, that Listen Notes is not ranking podcasts beyond the top 10%. So what you need to do to ensure that you continue to listen to a top 10% podcast globally is get on the iTunes and rate and review. So give us that sweet 5-star rating. All you need on top of that is a syllable. Good. Or if you really want to be helpful, great. Or if you want to be ambiguous, wow, but 5 stars. And then people will be like, well, what do they mean by wow? And they'll just have to check it out. But that will help our visibility. Would be cool to hear from people too. That's what Dave is always pining for. I don't care. I just want you to rate and review and hopefully enjoy what you're listening to or arguing with us mentally in your head. But Dave would really like to hear from you. Where can they email us, Dave?
You can email us at therebuggy@gmail.com. It's very easy to do. We do have one short letter we're going to talk to at the end of today's podcast.
We're going to talk to that letter.
But we can certainly accommodate 5, 6, 10 letters, probably.
We do timestamps, so if you don't care about letters, that won't interfere with your listening pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. If we ever started getting millions of letters, well, we'd have to do separate episodes just for the letters.
But, I mean, we want to... I think you said our goal was by...
2120.
2120, we want to get into the top 1%, so that means our fans have got to get to work now. We've got to start now with that goal.
It's a 100-year plan. Today, though, we're going to be talking about Warner Brothers' 1934. This is an Aline MacMahon, Ann Dvorak double feature. We'll be talking about Side Streets, directed by Alfred E. Green, and Heat Lightning, directed by the great Mervyn LeRoy. So let's start with Side Streets, Elise.
Well, Side Streets actually came out a few months after
Doesn't matter.
Heat Lightning. You don't care? You don't care?
We'll talk about them in the order that we watched them. I think
that might make us slightly less confused. Why don't you talk about Aline MacMahon to start out with?
One of the great personalities that make early 30s Warner Brothers films so enjoyable and so distinctive.
Warner Brothers only ever had one Queen of the Lot, well, during the 30s, and then, of course, Joan Crawford came in the 40s. That was, of course, Bette Davis, to start out with, the original Queen of the Lot, and then they had 2 great queens.
It's true, although if you want to talk about actresses at Warner Brothers, it's certainly known today as a man's studio and focusing on gangster films and other types of rough melodramas. Of course, they did make incredible films in that genre and those genres, but their highest paid star this time, 1934, and throughout the 30s actually, was Kay Francis. So they built lots of vehicles around her.
Until she became box office poison.
They kind of got fed up with her right away, but they were stuck with her contract. And the great thing is that they just threw her in these offbeat films that are incredible. I love just about every Kay Francis movie, and we're certainly going to be talking about some as we go through the decade. But technically...
So she wasn't their highest earning actress.
No, the highest paid.
Yes.
They hired her right at the crest of her stardom. She had been in Trouble in Paradise. They got her away from Paramount, and they had to offer her a lot of money, and then it was kind of like an albatross around Jack Warner's neck.
Well, it's not like they were doing movies that were much like Trouble in Paradise.
No,
like,
but...
what were they going to do with Kay Francis?
They did amazing things with her, but they just wound up being movies that the studio felt like were kind of write-offs, but that made them all the more interesting a lot of the time. There's
okay, but
so
there's
many...
there's no Kay Francis in this episode.
No, but we have Aline MacMahon, we have Ann Dvorak.
We have a roster of Warner Brothers character actors and comedians, all of whom were female, and they were obviously money earners of a degree. These are not late Bette Davis A pictures, and these are not glamorous characters. In fact, it's interesting Bette Davis being the queen of the Warner's lot because she didn't play working class characters, so that's a very different Warner's whenever Bette Davis couldn't figure out what to do with her for the longest time.
Think of the Petrified Forest, right? It has some similarity to Heat Lightning.
Well, I'm sure Heat Lightning is based on a play, which I'm sure was inspired by the Petrified Forest.
Well, Petrified Forest was a play as well, written around the same time.
That's what I'm saying.
So I don't think so. I think they're kind of simultaneously on Broadway.
Oh, well, if you say so.
Aline MacMahon, people today would know her best, I would imagine, from Gold Diggers of 1933, because that's a film that has been viewed by a wide spectrum of people who have any interest in the 30s, and she's one of the gold-digging ménage.
She's the comic relief? Well, it's a comedy, so everyone's a comic relief.
Everybody's funny in it, but she is the comic in the stage production.
That's true.
So she talks about that.
Aline MacMahon, which is germane to these two films, is not beautiful.
I think she is. Not Hollywood beautiful, I guess.
Well, and that's why you're with me.
Not Hollywood's idea of beautiful, but she is incredible looking.
Okay.
Ann Dvorak, I would agree Ann Dvorak is even more beautiful.
Well, I don't know. She's nothing to write home about either.
She's one of the best looking women who've ever existed, I think.
Wow, we're knowing today. We're finding out about what turns Dave's crank.
Now, these movies are not great showcases for Ann Dvorak, although I think that she's very good in them.
I think she's like the second build, at least according to Wikipedia.
She had many better roles at Warner's in the early 30s, and then she's actually even better in the late 40s after she comes back from being blacklisted for being a communist. And then she got blacklisted again with everybody else during the McCarthy era.
So Aline MacMahon, not Hollywood's idea of beautiful for sure. However, she had a long, very interesting marriage to a man with a much more extensive Wikipedia entry than hers, Clarence Stein, an American urban planner, architect, and writer, a major proponent of the Garden City movement in the United States, which apparently somebody is still very excited about to this day because he has this giant write-up, and there's this lovely little photo of the two of them gazing lovingly into each other's eyes in a beautiful-looking backyard.
She was a very popular stage actress as far as I know, and she had this period at Warner's in the early 30s where they were giving her starring roles and very important supporting roles in even bigger movies like Gold Diggers of 1933 and Five Star Final.
So our two directors here are Alfred E. Green and Mervyn LeRoy, so they are... What level would you rate these films at?
I think Side Streets is definitely a B picture. Mervyn LeRoy was the studio's top director, but he did a lot of different things. You know, he did I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, which was their biggest deal release of that year, and he did Gold Diggers of 1933. So they would put him on these huge prestige pictures. He also did Anthony Adverse, which was their biggest prestige picture of all. Then he left and wound up being a producer at MGM for a while. He produced The Wizard of Oz, and then he directed again in the 40s. He made Random Harvest, other great movies like that.
We've also seen Alfred E. Green before. In fact, in our last episode.
Babyface.
Last Warner's episode.
Yes. He's a fantastic director who doesn't get that much attention these days.
Babyface, we were talking about, is very, very stylish and really only works because of its direction. Its direction of Stanwyck in particular, but also the sort of droll comedy of its pacing.
And Side Streets is a terrific little movie.
Yeah, I like it.
Very well directed.
You know who didn't like it? Mordaunt Hall.
Ah, that Mordaunt sense of humor.
You know, I've never bothered to click on the name Mordaunt Hall before.
Well, he's a big New York Times reviewer, yeah.
Yeah, of course, but the name makes you think, and maybe this is why he used his third name, Mordaunt, Frederick William Mordaunt Hall. Makes you think that he is some kind of...
aristocrat?
Yeah, aristocrat, ultra-wasp, something like that. And maybe he is an ultra-wasp, probably, with a name like that, but he came to New York from England, worked as an advance agent for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, so this is how he earned his credentials as a film critic.
So not high society there.
No, not really. And then his obituary in the Times quoted here in his Wikipedia entry. His own paper describes him in his obituary as chatty, irreverent, and not particularly analytical. The interest of other critics in analyzing cinematographic techniques was not for him.
Who would know better than the New York Times? They hired him to write in that chatty, irreverent style.
So obviously, critical styles had changed by the time of Mordaunt Hall's death.
Big reviewers in the 30s for the Times are Mordaunt Hall and Bosley Crowther, right? So you see them all the time because the New York Times reviews are still reprinted.
And honestly, if you're going to have some idiot reviewing films in the New York Times, better that they have a name like that.
Yeah.
Or names like those.
So what did he say about this movie?
One of those wearying examples of writing down to what the studio believes to be the intelligence level of certain cinema audiences. Apparently, according to his obituary, he liked Ernst Lubitsch films. That was his idea of sophisticated film going. Everything else, junk.
Yeah, well, he's right that Ernst Lubitsch is a sophisticated filmmaker, but I think there are other ways to make a movie. This is a great little movie, very well written, and great characters.
Although he does credit the actors with doing what they can. I found both of these really little movies, 63 minutes apiece?
63 minutes each.
Heat Lightning is very dense. A lot happens in the 63 minutes. A lot happens in side streets too, but it's more kind of episodic with not being able to see. I definitely couldn't, although we'd watched it before, necessarily being able to see what's around the corner for the characters at each turn.
It's true, but for a movie that's only 63 minutes long that has so many twists and turns in the central relationship, it really does manage to make it a pairing that you are cheering for against all odds. And you get comfortable with it somehow, even though they only spend like a few minutes setting it up.
Yeah, and Aline MacMahon herself is very, very sympathetic in the central role. Something remarkable about both of these movies with her. So I've said in the past when we're doing our Warner's episodes that it's a studio that, although very progressive in its politics in the 30s, wasn't always great on gender. And I base that on a very terrible early Bette Davis movie called Ex-Lady, but also on the recurrence of a particular trope of a grasping ex-wife.
Sure. Although I think you can find that in movies made by just about any studio, unfortunately, during the 30s.
Yeah, but Warner's really has it in for that woman.
Yeah.
But these two movies are great.
Oh yeah, these movies
great
are
on gender and
about her character, and they look at the world through her eyes, even though a lot of other things are going on.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about both of them is that because Aline MacMahon is a protagonist and she isn't glamorized at all, they really objectify the male leads.
That's true.
In a way that you wouldn't expect. Make them into... I mean, obviously all male stars, Hollywood stars, are objectified, unless they're comedians, but it's incorporated into the narrative, this objectification. It's not for the audience only.
Yeah, well, Paul Kelly, he's a real Lothario in this movie. He just knocks him dead. Now, do you know the saga of Paul Kelly?
I do not know.
He was in jail not long before this for quite a while for killing someone.
Holy shit.
I think it was some kind of bar brawl that went out of hand or manslaughter or something. But anyway, he was a convicted killer, managed to make a career for himself in his late 30s onward. And he doesn't really star in a lot of movies, but he turns up in so many great parts throughout the 30s and 40s. He has an amazingly memorable role in The Roaring Twenties as Cagney's chief antagonist, Nick Brown, in the gang war segments of the film. Even more memorably, he will turn up as Gloria Graham's husband, ? In Crossfire. The liar. He's the guy that makes up a different story every time someone asks him why he's in her apartment.
So he's really the kind of actor who could only be a handsome leading man to Aline MacMahon.
He certainly didn't get that kind of role very often.
But he's very, very appealing in this movie.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I mean, he's always very likable, even when he's playing someone that's quite horrible, like in The Roaring Twenties. Another great role for him is Fear in the Night, where he plays a police inspector trying to help a crazed DeForest Kelley deal with the haunting feeling that he has killed someone while he was on some kind of drug jag. Do you remember that movie? We watched it.
Oh, that was very early in our relationship, which is getting quite old now.
It's a Cornell Woolrich story that they adapted as a really small B movie. But anyway, Paul Kelly has a great role in that one, too. This is the only movie I've ever seen where he is the male lead. Now, he might have done one or two others, but I'm not familiar with them. He's fantastic. It starts with him. He's a sailor who's too unreliable. Who's very good at
being a sailor, but is too unreliable to be employed anymore.
Yeah, because he keeps leaving the ship when he gets into a love affair in the South Seas or getting into fights with the police in different
the Chinese
cities.
Police.
Yeah, Shanghai.
Took us about 30 days to get that figured out,
yeah,
he says.
There's a black mark against his name in the shipping manifests of whatever city they're in. They never say. It seems like San Francisco to me. He can't get work. So he's basically wandering around the town, wondering what to do with himself. We get our meet cute at the zoo.
So this is the year of the code, and we've really gone into this issue before in our studio episodes, when you could and could not use the word Jewish, explicitly characterize characters as Jewish, and in this movie you cannot. But MacMahon is coded as Jewish in that she's a furrier with a Russian name and a Yiddish accent.
She is just enjoying a day off. We don't know much about her except that she likes the animals at the zoo and she likes to feed them. Paul Kelly comes along and picks up a peanut that she dropped. He's so hungry he has to eat it.
And he grabs her banana.
A policeman comes over immediately, is about to get rough with him because he's the kind of person that the police mistreat just out of habit. And she says, "Hey, lay off there, you fucking cops." Anti-cop cri de coeur, which you will get often in Warner Brothers.
So she invites him back to her place to have a meal, and they could already... It's very interesting, this whole first sequence up to their marriage, because they could each be playing it more like each of them is on the make.
Yeah.
But they really don't at all, even though each of them kind of is.
I don't really think
he
is.
They're not cynically on the make.
He's really just taking what she's offering.
He
needs food. He doesn't try in any way to get more out of her than she wants to give to him.
Yes, but if his option to go to sea were open, he would not be getting married to her or anyone else.
Yeah, but I thought you were talking about the scenes before they get married.
No, I mean on the make in his marriage to her.
There are these early scenes where they have dinner. He really has nowhere to sleep, but he doesn't say anything like that. He's planning to go out there and not see her again, but she realizes that he needs...
This could all be played as he's angling to stay there and angling to marry her.
Yeah, but he's not.
And she's angling to get married.
Yeah, he's definitely not thinking about that. He's not thinking more than one meal ahead, ever, really, in this movie.
So we find out that she is an entrepreneur. Oh, and by the way, this movie was known in the UK as A Woman in Her 30s.
Well, I guess she was in her 30s, Aline MacMahon, at that time. Not much into her 30s, right? She's not very old.
But regardless, she is too old for marriage because she's in her 30s.
She's described as older than Paul Kelly. I don't think she actually is.
Well, let's find out. 1899?
So she would have been 35 in these films.
Well, she's definitely in her 30s.
I'm sure he's at least that old, probably older, but he's supposed to be playing younger, or anyway, more immature.
He's boyish.
Same age.
Same age.
Exact same age as her. But he's younger than her in the movie.
Not beautiful translates to old.
Even though he does love her. That's what I think the movie does such a great job of. He really does care about her. He likes being with her, but he does not think of her primarily as a sexual being.
Well, I don't think, this is kind of the question that makes the movie interesting to watch. I don't think his issue with his philandering is that she's not beautiful.
No, I think
that he was angling. I think
it's that she's his boss.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he'd be faithful in any marriage.
Maybe not.
First of all, he wouldn't have gotten married, as I said, unless...
No, well, exactly.
Except for these circumstances.
But see, that's the thing. I think the fact that she is in charge is what he doesn't like. This is why he likes to move on all the time, because he likes to feel like he's a free agent. So the fact that he's stuck there, even though he really likes her, it makes him want to at least prove to himself, as much as he can, that
But I don't think he has a problem with a woman as a boss.
No, anyone. He doesn't want a boss.
The movie seems to be depicting, and this is where it gets really interesting for 1934 in terms of gender, it seems to be depicting that he would be perfectly happy to be a house husband as long as there's a child to look after.
Yeah, well, see, this is why I think of the movie as a kind of proletarian penny serenade. They need a child to keep them together.
Maybe, although by the end, that's questionable. So do you want to go through it a little bit?
So yes, they get married and he is going to learn the fur business from the ground up. But he doesn't learn things very well.
Well, first of all, he's being blocked by her single old employee who wants to pretend that these are deep, dark secrets and is not making any effort to help this guy out, especially since, according to gender, he shouldn't be learning how to sew anyway.
He doesn't show any aptitude for it. He doesn't really want to do it. He's willing to help as much as he can. He winds up mostly delivering packages.
Helen Lowell is the employee?
Yeah, she's great. So she is much older version of an Eve Arden character, right?
Or Thelma Ritter in All About Eve.
She's a cynical best friend and underling.
Truth-telling employee.
So they've been through a lot. They yell at each other. They're angry at each other all the time, but they love each other and they need each other to keep the business going. And that's sort of the dynamic that they have. All of these things are established so economically.
MacMahon, or Bertha, from Bertha to Olga in these movies.
But she calls herself Madame Valerie because you need a moniker, a society moniker.
So she is the salesperson, and she's the only one who can handle that end of things, although she wants to eventually groom her husband to be able to do that. And Tilly does everything else.
Yes. Well, she seems to. I imagine Aline MacMahon also must be able to sew and do that kind of stuff, but it's not her primary role, no.
I think she designs. So this is, the twisty-turny episodicness of this movie and the little domestic and big domestic occurrences that happen. And of course, it kind of reminds me of one of the little Nerusa Satsuko Hara movies, something like that.
And it's called Side Streets because the fur store is on the side street, so it's a cut rate purveyor.
It's also helpful that you can take your mistress there, because
exactly.
People aren't going to have their eye on you in the side street.
Yeah, if you go to whatever the big fur place is on whatever the equivalent of Fifth Avenue is in whatever city
then
they're
your wife
in.
is going to know for sure.
Exactly. Everyone will be talking about it. It'll get into the gossip columns.
Gradually, through several episodes, Aline MacMahon's character is revealed to be, not perfect and very much in love with this man, Tim O'Hara.
Yeah.
Willing to manipulate things a little bit to keep him, but also very ethical.
Yeah.
So we kind of, in this short space of time, grow to love her and therefore understand how he could grow to love her despite marriage not really being his thing.
There's something about it that makes you feel like it's looking forward as well to the bigamist, right? This guy that's just all over the place sleeping with everyone, and somehow his feelings still seem kind of pure and relatable, right? Which is not common in a movie. Usually a philanderer, you're supposed to feel very negatively toward them.
Well, yeah, I think it's the way it's all set up so that you know that he has just kind of ended up in this position, that this is not something he would have sought. He's not a gold digger. It's not something he would have sought out. What do you call it if it's a man? Fortune hunter. He's not a fortune hunter.
If they had just let him go to sea, he would have kept doing that.
But again, like I said, it could have been portrayed much more cynically, and it isn't.
Right. Now we find out that he's involved in a fairly heavy affair with Ann Dvorak.
Yeah, right away we find that out.
On one of his deliveries, he stops by a bar to meet up with her and share beer and set things up for sex later in the evening before he goes home for dinner.
And then the next time we see him show up at home, he has definitely just had sex.
Yeah, he needs to clean up. He goes up to the room and finds a bill from an obstetrician. And he has to look it up in the dictionary, which is awesome. That's a great scene.
Well, they've got a dictionary right there.
Yeah, of course. He must be trying to improve himself.
He's going to be a salesperson.
So he finds out what that means. They're going to have a baby, and you don't know how he's going to react. And
Well, also it's a very clever way, now that the code is in place, for them to know when to actually say baby or pregnancy, I guess. Even though we see the word childbirth.
He runs down to interrupt her sale. She's been working
in his
hard.
Undershirt.
Yeah.
Because he was changing his shirt to get the sex shirt off.
This is the height of rudeness, and he chases the customer away. And you
But
don't...
she doesn't mind when she finds out why.
Because you think, oh, well, guy gonna be angry that now he's tied to her forever because of this child? But no, it's the reverse. He's really excited. He can't believe it. And he gives her a passionate kiss.
So it does seem kind of psychologically implausible that this man who was so obsessed with his freedom is also obsessed with having a baby and looking after a baby.
That's just what makes it so good, right? It's a believable flip, I think. That someone who is that drawn one way could easily be drawn, irrationally drawn, to just wander around the sea. Maybe really what he was looking for was something like having a child.
All right, that's very beautiful, Dave.
It doesn't describe anything like,
sentiment.
a kind of psychology that I have, but I find it believable.
He was searching the seas for a baby.
Exactly.
He didn't know how to get one.
He changes his tune. He meets up with Ann Dvorak immediately and tells her, and again, their parting, it's really nicely done. He breaks up with her. It's pretty brutal.
He reveals that he never told her he was married.
Exactly.
So we ought to hate this guy.
Yeah, but he's so nice in his send-off to her that she doesn't seem to hate him, and we don't either, right?
Well, before that, he did have a scene with Aline MacMahon where they basically state between them that she knows that he's been having affairs, and she just hasn't been able to challenge him on it because she's too much in love with him, and he promises her that everything's going to be different now. Follows through with that the next day with Ann Dvorak.
Yeah, exit Ann Dvorak, we think.
Well, except that so little time has been devoted to her that we know she's going to have to pop back up again.
But now the new status quo is time to get through this pregnancy, have the baby, and begin the little family, which is going to expand by one other member. They need someone to help around the house while Aline MacMahon is going through the end stages of pregnancy. She obviously can't get around as easily. She needs to spend some time in bed. So they bring in cousin Ilka, who Aline MacMahon was supporting anyway, she says. She was living in New York. Presumably maybe her brother's dead or something. So she's the only person that can help the extended family members. So Ilka is summoned to help out at the house. And Ilka also falls for the charms of Tim O'Hara.
Her life is pretty damn boring, so
yeah,
don't really blame her. He has no interest at all for as long as this child is in the picture, though.
Exactly. He's really consumed with helping around the establishment and taking very seriously his role as a dad.
And here we see from Warner Brothers, this sailor is happily doing the dishes and walking the baby while Aline MacMahon holds down the business. And there's just no tension on this basis at all. He doesn't like having nothing to do, but as long as he has the baby, he's fine.
Sadly, the baby doesn't live very long.
Well, this is a kind of a remarkable scene because he takes the baby out to a park, and the park is looking out on the ships.
Not a lush park, that's for sure, but there's a nice bench there, and you can look out at the water, and you could see, I guess, some of the sights that the harbor has to offer.
He doesn't seem to be longing for it, but maybe this is something he wants to share with little Tim. Not Tim.
Yeah, it is little Tim.
Wait, both the babies
Tim
are named
Jr.,
Tim?
yeah.
Both of them are named Tim.
Yep.
Okay. Little Tim in his little fur coat that they made him.
A woman sitting next to him on the bench.
An elderly lady.
She notices the baby is very sick.
So this must have come upon the baby just now.
Yeah, high fever.
And it's not good.
No, so he rushes home, they summon a doctor. During the call to summon the doctor, actually, Tilly intercepts a call from Ann Dvorak.
And of course, we know from many exchanges with her and Bertha that she is aware of this philandering and does not approve of it. And she's more obviously willing to face it head on than Bertha. So she does what, from her perspective, absolutely is the right thing to do, because everything seems to be going well now. So why rock the boat by this mistress showing up?
Yeah, old girlfriend calls up, just tell her Tim's gone to sea. So that's what she says.
But we know
that she must be pregnant.
Due to melodrama tropes, that she must also be pregnant. And we have already become sympathetic to her in our short time with her.
So that is on the back burner.
Everyone is sympathetic, but there's never any contest. There's never any, maybe he should end up with someone else. Because you just want whatever Bertha wants.
It's true. The baby dies. The doctor does his best, but unfortunately, it's not good enough. He actually stays for hours with the baby when pleaded to do so, even though he says that's not the deciding factor. I mean, I've given the medicine that I have. We have to just see what happens. But he does stay, which is a nice scene. Pretty devastating when the baby dies.
And it is, I mean, given the small scale and sort of lyrical direction of this movie, I think Penny Serenade is a very good comparison.
Yeah, I think so,
and also
too.
Actually the interrogation, if I do say so myself, also the gentle interrogation of gender roles is there in Penny Serenade as well. And also Stevens has a lengthy comedy segment showing that knowing how to take care of a child is learned and can be learned by either gender.
Yeah, Applejack.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, we'll talk about Penny Serenade someday, I'm sure.
This is where the psychology of Tim Sr. gets interesting, I think, because I feel like after this loss, it's not so much that he has genuinely gone back to his old ways as that he doesn't yet realize that he doesn't want them anymore.
Right.
It takes him the length of the film for this realization to catch up with him that he just doesn't know any other way to be, but he doesn't actually want this any longer.
He doesn't go out looking for a new side affair here. It's just that Ilka's in the house, and he just out of habit tells his tall sea tales and enchants her, and she wants to have sex with him, and he's like, well, I've got to say yes, I'm a man, that's how it goes.
This is what I like, and she wants to run away, and that's what I like.
We'll go to sea together? I mean, I don't see how that's gonna work.
Well, she says she'd be happy to get on a train. That's almost like getting on a boat.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then I find it so interesting that for the rest of this movie, Ilka thinks that she's in a film noir, but nobody else does. And she just keeps trying to generate a film noir out of herself, out of her way of talk, and out of her manner of acting, and everything else.
You know, eventually she does wear him down to the point where he agrees to depart.
He's very easy to influence.
Yes, he is. The last person he talks to.
A baby can influence him.
Oh, very much so, yeah. We also get a lot of vignettes of
let's talk
the
about
way Aline MacMahon runs her shop.
The ethical substance of this character and how we come to love her, yeah.
Two main vignettes, I guess, are the rich man with the mistress.
Oh, yes, and Meto, Humphrey Bogart's abusive wife.
A really good actress. I always like her. She never really got starring roles.
She's got a real Warner's face, too. She's very likable in this movie, although apparently she tried to kill Humphrey Bogart more than once.
Look, they had a bad dynamic going between them. So
yeah, that needed to stop.
They drank too much, and then she would try to stab him, and he obviously fought back in different ways, too. It sounds brutal. Yeah, in this movie, she is a slightly aging shop girl, as they put it. She's also supposed to be a little bit beyond marriageable age. She lands herself a younger beau, and what would really put her over the top would be a nice fur coat. She can't afford it.
They'll propose to you then.
Aline MacMahon finds a way to get it onto her back. She says, okay, well, $5 down, $5 a week for the next 20 weeks or 19 weeks. She also realizes she may not get that $95, so...
Well, yeah, because she talks it over with Tilly, who doesn't understand why she's giving fur coats away.
Yeah, so she's just, I'll just tack on $100 to one of the other coats that a rich guy's buying. But we see that she does have her limits, right? Like, she won't help someone who is just running a blatant scheme, because there's that Jaguar coat that the young woman wants to buy. She wants Aline MacMahon to tack on $400 to the price so they could split it evenly. But she won't do that.
The thing is that when you tack on, in capitalism, when you tack on to your price, when you raise your margins, that's due to the labor, in this case done by herself and her one employee. The labor that has been put into this, but this, well, I mean, this woman actually has put labor into her relationship with this man, but not into the fur coat.
These are the limits of Aline MacMahon's sympathies with other women. She does have a lot of sympathy for Meto. She does not seem to have much sympathy for young chorus girls who are gold-digging old rich guys.
No, it's true.
Her loyalty in those transactions is generally to the rich guys.
But she's really nice to Ann Dvorak. Her sin is that she doesn't tell Tim that he has a child by this woman, because clearly he would immediately leave her.
Exactly.
But to make up for that, she decides she's going to support this woman.
Yeah.
And also, I guess, keep tabs on her so she doesn't accidentally run into Tim.
Well, I don't know about that. But no, she does want to help. And she also likes seeing the child. The child has meant a lot to her as well.
That's true. She likes it a lot better than this woman who's become accidentally pregnant out of wedlock.
But she also really likes the rich guy's wife, Dorothy Peterson.
That's true.
Now, that's a really grim story, ultimately, right? Like, we meet the young chorus girl who gets this $1,000 ermine. We find out later on that she killed herself.
So I guess the movie has some sympathy for the chorus girls.
I agree, yeah. But Aline MacMahon doesn't particularly.
No.
She just keeps thinking about, this poor woman, Dorothy Peterson, who's married to this creep who drove his girlfriend to suicide.
So you see, she doesn't really have sympathy for the rich guys. She just doesn't have sympathy for either of them.
No, I don't think she has sympathy for the rich guys. I think that she knows that those are her customers.
Oh, I see.
So
Yes.
she has to treat them fairly because she wants them to come back with their next girlfriend. But no, it's not sympathy.
Yes.
She does like this wife, and the movie definitely does make you think, okay, well, it's not all fun and games to be a chorus girl, gold-digging rich guys. A lot of these women wind up feeling terrible, and they're stuck in a no-win situation and kill themselves. I mean, it's a pretty common occurrence in the 1930s.
And this wife, again, the way she's played, she does get our sympathy right away. She's just constantly going on about how her husband's business isn't doing well enough because it's the Depression.
He's doing fine. He's just spending a lot of the money he's earning on fur coats for different women.
So the best episode of the whole thing that has a punchline at the end is when she figures out an elaborate way to blackmail this guy into getting his wife a fur coat that will make up the difference. Oh, is that the one that makes up the difference? No, that's the cheetah coat.
Yeah, the cheetah coat is the one that gets the $100 back. This is much bigger game she's hunting
This
here.
is just a nice profit for her in addition to
making him value his wife, paying even more for a mink coat than the ermine coat that he bought for his girlfriend.
and maybe even a little bit of punishment for this
I think
suicide.
So. Yeah, hopefully.
Punishment in the pocketbook.
Although, that guy gets off scot-free. He's going to Europe with his wife.
Gonna have to buy a lot of fur coats from Aline MacMahon, who proves that she knows all about everything with this little sly gesture that she does.
And I guess there's a little feeling of solidarity as well, because she knows that her husband is also out there philandering. Although he doesn't buy anyone coats, he just gives them the gift of himself. It all comes to a head on a dark and stormy night when Ilka is really fed up.
Well, Ilka's getting more and more restless because he doesn't seem that eager to get away.
I do think the movie lets down a little bit on Ilka. I don't find her very likable. Like, she's not a complete monster, but they could have done more with her.
Well, she's pretty ungrateful.
Exactly.
To come into this home and home wreck it. To that extent, she and Tim are the same, and we aren't very pleased with him either. Their ingratitude kind of echoes each other, but she is only that.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
All that's presented.
The only problem I have with the movie is that I think she could have been given a few more dimensions here and there. I mean, we understand that she hates the lot that she has drawn in life. It's not very fun to just be assisting at this fur shop, but I think that we could have seen a different side of her somehow.
The reason that the movie lets her down is because, like I said, she is the one who is there to bring the melodrama element into it that the movie rejects.
Yeah.
Because she thinks she's in a film noir.
Well, there's no such thing as film noir at that time, but she thinks she's in a kind of proto-crime melodrama, yeah. And she lets loose and explains that, of course, Tim could never really want to have sex with Bertha, because just look at you.
Old. Look in the mirror.
She feels bad after unleashing what she calls the truth.
That bad.
No, but she doesn't do it purposefully. She just flips out because she's so angry that they've been discovered.
Paula Kelly does a good job of presenting us in Tim with a man who really doesn't seem to be into lookism at all. He's into women.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Women under 80.
The whole incident gives him time to rethink things.
Because again, it's only, perhaps implausibly, although I don't think this is outside of the realm of human possibility, Ilka, again, is the one setting these terms of, you're a handsome man in his mid-30s, so you must only want to have sex with young, pretty girls. But the movie itself doesn't buy that framework at all. Again, she's presenting a conventional framework or a type of story framework that the movie is rejecting.
Yeah. So on the way down to the cab, he makes his decision. Parallel to all of that, the Ann Dvorak story comes back into play in a big way. She has met an Australian fellow who wants her to go to the other side of the world, start anew, and the baby, she does care about the baby. She wants the baby to have a good outcome, but she doesn't feel any need to keep the baby with her on this adventure.
Again, this is like a really radical small gesture that occurs here, and that this woman just doesn't want this baby.
She's a very likable woman too, right?
Exactly.
Like, she's not a villain for giving up the baby. The movie seems to understand that this is something that women might need to do sometimes. Not keep a baby with them.
That they never wanted in the first place.
Exactly.
Well,
she does read Aline MacMahon perfectly. She knows that Aline MacMahon would love to just adopt this baby.
But the way this all goes down, of course, is that at the time that she accepts this baby, she thinks that Tim has gone off with Ilka.
Yeah, it's not the thing that brings them back together.
No.
So that's a bit of a difference from Penny Serenade.
He's just been, after she treats Bertha so terribly with his speech that
Exactly.
that forces him to realize that who wants to go with this woman.
Well, not
Like,
only that.
He has a nicer woman already.
Yeah, no, I think he realizes when he sees how hurt Bertha is by all of this, that he finally understands how much he loves her.
And Aline MacMahon does a really nice job of showing pride, like Bertha's pride in that moment, and then, crumbling after she gets into her room alone. You can tell that interestingly, this character really loves her business.
Yeah, and she's very good at it.
And has like a very full life doing these sort of ethical and unethical transactions with her customers and with her friend and employee. So you feel like she would be fine.
Oh, yeah.
Even by herself.
Yeah.
And particularly fine with the baby. So him coming back is just icing on the cake. She just gets everything she wants.
Exactly. And he winds up getting everything he wants, too. And it does feel kind of like this is a reward for him. He gets another Tim Jr. because he was not aware that he was going to be walking back into a little family situation.
And because it's not the thing that brings them back together, which is the way it differs from Penny Serenade.
But it is probably the thing that makes you feel 100% that he's not going to philander again.
Well, I don't know.
As long as his baby stays alive.
No, I was going to say, on the contrary, that allows us to know that this is not going to be the only thing holding their marriage together now. Because he realizes that he wants to be with her.
No, that's probably true too. But just as a little insurance, a living baby around the house for Tim O'Hara.
Now they will just go on and he will raise the children and do the housework and she will continue to run the business.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
We have our radical little family, even for 2020 here at the end of this Warner Brothers movie.
I mean, both of these films are quite significant when you're looking at it in the context of 1930s films, in that they present a businesswoman who remains a businesswoman from beginning to end of the films, an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely.
Usually something changes in that status, even if they start out that way.
Well, let alone the husband not having a job at the beginning or end of the film.
That's true. All right, Elise, on to Heat Lightning.
So the authors of the play were George Abbott, a very big name in Broadway direction and production.
Absolutely. I've heard of him. He lived to 108.
20th Century American Theater. As a writer, less well known, but he did write the familiar name that jumped out on me here. He did write Three Men on a Horse.
Oh, I love that movie adaptation.
Which was also adapted by Warner's.
Yeah, Mervyn LeRoy directed that as well.
Leon Abrams is the other writer of Heat Lightning the play, but this movie does have two screenwriters as well, so who knows how much it resembled the play. And we did look it up, and it is from 1933, and Petrified Forest is from 1935, so the influence might actually be in the other direction.
Yeah, I guess Robert Sherwood saw Heat Lightning, sparked an idea in his head, right? Because the setting is so similar.
I know, yeah. And of course, that's the much more famous play.
Well, I love both films. Haven't had a chance to read the play, so I don't have any real ability to comment on that.
So speaking of noir, I thought it was interesting how noirish the ending is when Aline MacMahon finally lets down her talked about tresses. And that is what the poster here on the Wikipedia page for the film really plays up.
I just killed a rat.
A woman standing over a man's prone body with a gun in her night wrap falling off of her with her long black tresses, which isn't very indicative of the movie as a whole, but it's somewhat indicative of the ending.
Here's the poster. It's the last scene in the movie, pretty much.
Spoilers!
Yeah. Jesus. People are always complaining about trailers giving away too much. So this film, it's, again, Aline MacMahon is the most prominent figure. She is the elder sister. Ann Dvorak is her younger sister and kind of surrogate daughter.
So this has a huge selection of the Warner's character actor or minor star.
Yeah, we got Glenda Farrell. We got Frank
Actors.
McHugh. He would be the star of Three Men on a Horse, and he's in all the Cagney movies. Preston Foster, I love that guy. We've seen him, but only briefly. He is in I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. He's the guy that wants to rob the lunch wagon, right? And
Who does he play in this movie?
well, he's
Oh, the love interest.
Yeah, the
Well,
head-
I mean, I don't know what to call it.
the head criminal.
The head criminal / love interest. And of course, there's also Ruth Donnelly,
Yes.
paired with Glenda Farrell as a sort of double act in this movie.
Now, Glenda Farrell is an expert double actor.
So this movie is excellent on gender as far as the main characters are concerned, and then gets a lot of comic relief out of some terrible women.
Yeah.
It really illustrates the Warners' class ethic.
Yes, it does. So they're rich, they got a lot of jewels, they suck.
Yeah, that's it, basically. They're awful. Glenda Farrell is like a nymphomaniac, and her best friend...
Is also a nymphomaniac.
Yeah, but a less successful
Well, yeah.
nymphomaniac.
It's not for lack of trying.
And
though.
then there's a henpecked husband that we see in the first... Really, really... Oh my god, actually the dialogue is amazing for these two.
Well, you know who those actors are. Edgar Kennedy, he's most famous, I guess, today, probably, for the lemonade vendor scene in Duck Soup, getting harassed by Harpo. And also incredible scenes in Unfaithfully Yours.
Oh.
The way you handle.
Oh, I love that movie. We're
Yeah.
gonna have to do that sometime. Preston Sturges.
And the wife is Jane Darwell, who was Ma Jode in The Grapes of Wrath, and she is the Ma also in Devil and Daniel Webster, and she kept going all the way to Mary Poppins. She's the woman who feeds the birds in Mary
Oh,
Poppins.
very nice. So this is a marvelous comic sketch of a terrible marriage.
Yeah.
The climax, I think, is where he asks for a lemon soda and she brings him a Coke, and when he complains, she says, "You like Coke better," and the viewer is not sure if maybe she's correct.
Well, it looks like she is, because he starts sipping it kind of happily at that point. He was just being contrary.
Exactly. Because he didn't want to give in to her too quickly
Yep.
when she suggested a Coke. Because
Yeah.
she knew that he wanted the Coke. See, this is brilliant.
It really is. We've also got Lyle Talbot, who turns up all over the place in 30s Warner Brothers films, often playing a kind of weak character, and he is in this one as well. He's the sidekick to Preston Foster.
Right.
He's the guy that opens things for Ann Dvorak to destroy her life in 3 on a Match, which is probably her best role at Warner Brothers in the 30s. He also appears in Glenn or Glenda 20 years later, so that gives you a sense of where his career is headed.
Oh my. Of course, you love Glenn or Glenda.
I think it's an incredible film, yeah.
Yeah. I actually think that this movie, more than any we've done for this series so far, even Babyface, illustrates the Warner's ethos.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Warner Brothers in a nutshell.
It's funny because before we started this podcast, or rather this podcast series, when we first met and we were discussing film, because I'd never spent, I knew there were different studios, and I even knew a bit about the different head producers at the different studios, but I'd never gone very far into investigating or paying attention to that in my cinephilia. And then when we met and you were telling me your idea that all of the different studios had very distinct, pronounced personalities, I scoffed at that. And it's not exactly ironclad. It's particularly, as we've talked about, it's difficult to say that any studio has a consistent personality over time for the entirety of the studio era.
Well, sure, there are different decision makers in power at different times.
But in terms of being able to identify, at least during this 30s period, a Warner style, I now have to say that I'm completely on board with you.
Good.
Warner's might actually be the studio, well, Paramount too, to a large degree, but really Warner's, more than any studio, is the one where there seems to be a lot of consistency about the kind of movies they were trying to make over an extended period of time.
Sure, and every studio made a variety of genres, right?
And it's true, Betty Davis Warner's movies of the 30s, like the ones where she became a star, aren't like other Warner's movies, and yet they're very much Warner's movies.
Sure. Same thing with Errol Flynn movies, right? Like, they don't typically take place in our century at all, but they still do tend to have a kind of social justice aim to them anyway, which you get in Warner Brothers films, right? Like Captain Blood, especially, and I guess Robin Hood as well.
Well, Betty Davis movies don't have any social aim Well, you know what? That I can't entirely say that.
No, I don't think that's true.
But we'll get to that some other day. But yeah, and then in the 40s they turn into, as I've argued or suggested before, into the best women's picture studio of the 40s.
Specializing in noirish women's pictures.
That are consistently amazing, but again, not like anything they're doing in the 30s.
No.
So there's lots of caveats to this, and yet I have to agree that there are certain movies that only Warner Brothers could make and nobody else could, and this is one.
Yeah. We're in the desert. It seems like it's Arizona, near the Mexican border. There's a gas station in the middle of nowhere, so echoing or anticipating the restaurant and gas station in Petrified Forest. Similarly isolated. This one, though, is run just by two sisters, Aline MacMahon and Ann Dvorak.
I have never seen a woman looking in a movie from the studio era the way that Aline MacMahon does in this movie. She is so deglamorized at the beginning of the movie.
She's dressed for work, she says. And she's working. She's a mechanic.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is not a woman dressed up as a man to look cute.
No, it's just those are the clothes you would wear if you're going to work on a car.
Yeah, but she's also deliberately playing down her femininity.
Well, maybe, but
No, not maybe. That's becomes a very important character point. We discover the reasons for this transformation. I decided to go as far in the opposite direction of my past.
Yeah, I know.
In terms of my gender expression as it was possible.
It's true. She's definitely proving a point a lot of the time here.
Well, not just proving a point. I think the whole movie is about her hard-won rejection of any kind of sexual congress with men for reasons that we see illustrated in the movie. And it ends on a very bleak note in those terms because things aren't going any better for her sister. And this is the first note introduced at the beginning of the movie. This is like a terrifying militant feminist movie.
So Ann Dvorak is kind of analogous to the Bette Davis character in Petrified Forest. She's a young woman who wants to do things that she just can't do in this isolated place.
Yeah, but none of them involve culture.
No, she just wants to go to a dance.
There are no good options for this character.
Goes in a totally different direction, but you can see that there's some similarity. Aline MacMahon is doing everything she can to prevent her sister from embarking on an adventure that she knows will turn into a nightmare.
But there aren't any alternative, better options for her, either romantically or otherwise.
No.
There are just stay here, run this shop with your sister, and never have sex. Or fun.
Right.
That's it. But spare yourself unimaginable pain.
Now, she does have a male friend / possible admirer, Willard Robertson, that actor.
Possible admirer, but that's not a very good option.
He's a big ranch owner who lives nearby.
I'd take the cars if I were her.
I like that actor a lot.
He's nice, but why bother?
No, I'm not saying anything about whether she wants to actually be with him, but the movie does present him as someone that is very impressed by her.
Yeah.
He's a man who's very impressed by her and understands her point of view on the world and shares her opinion of the kind of men that have been coming after the younger sister.
Right, these wild guys.
Things are really stacked against Ann Dvorak ever having any fun. What Aline MacMahon derives satisfaction from is just being there when people are in great need. I mean, you could die if your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, obviously. And they are a way station for many different people who come and go.
And again, as in Side Streets, interestingly, she's a sort of ethical business owner.
Yeah, of course.
She derives...
It's a very similar character.
She likes her work. She derives pleasure from helping people. She is nice to the Mexicans.
That's a very important plot point because the rich people who come by think that they're social undesirables that are going to steal their jewels. And she's like, no, they're just a nice Mexican family on their way to fiesta. So shut up. Again, you got the Warner's social justice tinges there.
Probably wouldn't see anything like this from another studio at this time.
Unlikely. The big drama begins when a couple of men pull in, enter the restaurant area order some beers, chat up Ann Dvorak.
And we know right off the bat from the way they're talking and the fact that this is a movie that they are gangsters of some sort on the run.
Yeah, and there's a very definite dynamic between them. Preston Foster is the bold ringleader, and Lyle Talbot is just a stooge who got rung in on this and really wishes he hadn't. And they tell us in their dialogue that, yes, they've robbed a bank in Salt Lake City, they've killed people, it was all Preston Foster's doing. Lyle Talbot did not have a gun or shoot anyone, and he wishes he was anywhere else but here. It's too late, their die is cast, and they're stuck together, and Preston Foster is just barking orders at him every minute. Now, Preston Foster is not presented as a complete monster. He doesn't necessarily want to kill people, but he does if they get in his way.
We'll talk about it when we get there. He gets quite the final speech.
He does indeed, doesn't he? For the minute, they're just trying to figure out what their next step is. They ascertain that no one's getting news anytime soon around here, so they should be fairly safe. There's not going to be a headline with their pictures or names plastered all over it, so they can relax for a little bit and enjoy their sandwiches.
The movie kind of tells the backstory through this coincidence of this being Olga's old flame.
Yeah, when he notices her working on the car, he recognizes her right away.
Despite the way she's dressed.
Yeah.
Through that coincidence, it kind of tells, interspersed with these comedic, plot-pointy episodes, tells the story of how she came to be this way, both in her adoption of a mannish lifestyle and in her attitude towards her sister's love life.
So she was a kind of party girl at a club or dance hall in Tulsa, and he was a young swain and criminal about town in Oklahoma. They had an involvement for several years, and he obviously didn't treat her very well a lot of that time, and was behaving badly in other ways.
He talks about her as a woman who was really... He doesn't say anything about his feelings about her. He talks about her to his companion as a woman who was crazy about him and he could get away with anything with her.
Right, but no, he obviously did have feelings for her as well. This affected him.
That's not how he talks about it.
No.
You can see it in their interactions.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
can see he's been thinking about her ever since then.
And there's a dynamic between them that is... There's some chemistry there.
And when he does get to the point of telling her off because of her abandonment of her formerly glam attire, it's not real, right? It's just negging. He's just trying to goad her into doing something. He still finds her attractive, whatever she's wearing.
Yeah, because I'm not sure what he is actually... He's talking like he's going to seduce her to get her out of the way, but I'm not sure what seducing her actually accomplishes in those terms.
I think it's accomplishing many different things at once. There is the plot reason for it, right? Because if while they're having sex, Lyle Talbot's supposed to be breaking into the safe.
Oh, I see. He just fails to accomplish
because he doesn't
that.
really want to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was his plan. But he also does obviously have feelings for her. And he figures, well, okay, she's made this almost irrevocable decision. The only way I'm going to get her to change her mind, it's not by seducing her, it's by playing on her pride and insinuating that she can't go back even if she wanted to. She can't be sexy anymore.
And this is where we hear about the mane of hair that she's hiding under this kerchief.
Yeah.
That he actually tries to... I mean, obviously it represents her sexuality and femininity itself, because he tries to uncover it when they first see each other and she jumps away from him.
She says, I'm dressed for work.
So then we see she does undergo this transformation. This all takes place in the course of a day and a night.
Now she gets distracted, right? This is important as well. She has been making a lot of noises about how no matter what anyone tries, Myra is not going to that dance. She is going to intercept this creep that's coming to get her. But she gets totally knocked off course by George's arrival, Preston Foster, and she forgets about that part with very dire consequences.
So she gets herself all dressed up and all glammed up, but she still doesn't let her hair down yet. So these are important phases. I thought it was interesting the way the movie really presents gender as performance, gender expression as performance, because I don't think she knows how she feels about how she would ideally like to express herself in terms of her gender. She is just swinging between poles, neither of which are necessarily any kind of self-expression at all. One was a way to be to attract men, and the other is a reaction against that.
Yeah. Well, the world doesn't really let you just be yourself without any reference to anyone else. There's always always something going on, some contextual element that you can't avoid.
Yeah, but I mean, it really highlights that
Yeah.
in a way that isn't usual for a Hollywood film.
That's true. And when she does come out with her makeup on, Willard Robertson is there as well that night. He is shocked by this new form of self-presentation, and he has to sit there and listen as Preston Foster reminisces about their old romance.
And then we also get the diversion of the rich women. Or, well, not diversion because it becomes part
Their
of the
jewels
plot.
become very important. Yeah, so they're both coming from Reno, and I guess they're taking the long way around, because you don't need to go through Arizona to get anywhere.
Oh, we didn't
from
even
Reno.
mention the two chippies and their sugar daddy. They're lecturing sugar daddy.
Oh, that was amazing, right? Like, that was the kind of thing that you get in a lot of early 30s Warner Brothers films, like dames, right? The most sanctimonious minister-type guys are always gropers. So this guy picked them up in St. Louis, I think they said, somewhere anyway, and he's been driving them west ever since, lecturing them and groping them at the same time. But yeah, they can handle themselves. Again, this is very characteristic of Warner Brothers. They don't present these women as victims.
Well, yes, they do. They present the two central women as victims.
Yeah, okay. Well, these two, anyway, are totally able to handle themselves.
They really are party girls, I guess. Or at least that's the side of themselves that we're going to see.
But they're likable. There's nothing, the movie isn't judging them whatsoever. They want to go to Hollywood and be discovered.
Yeah,
they're ready to put up with a guy who might try to grab them occasionally in order to get there.
Go to Hollywood and it's going to be Mulholland Drive.
Well, possibly, yeah. They might have a harder time with the creeps in Hollywood. Anyway, the movie just presents them as fun individuals who are trying something out, working with what they have.
Then we get Glenda Farrell, Ruth Donnelly, and their chauffeur,
Frank McHugh,
who just wants a break, who just wants to rest for the night and not keep driving them around
and fending off their sexual advances all day long. Which is, I mean, it's amazing casting, because obviously Frank McHugh is not a sex symbol. Whatever you think.
Well, that's why I say Glenda Farrell's a nymphomaniac, because if nothing else is on offer, she'll take this.
Yeah, or just anyone who resists, it just makes it all the more tempting, right? Like, for both of these women, like, neither of them should be after Frank McHugh. They just got their divorces, and they want to get back in the saddle. He's married. He says he has a wife in Brooklyn.
But they don't care.
No, they don't care. They're not in it for romance. They just want the conquest.
He has a nice moment with Aline MacMahon where he's trying to break the car.
Yeah.
And she is okay with getting it still broken.
Quasi-superheroic figure who nevertheless is okay with a little larceny when it's directed at the right people, i.e. rich people. She's okay with making these ladies pay a little money to stay in one of their
shacks.
Yeah, exactly. For one night, so Frank McHugh can get some rest and everyone is happy the next day.
And we get some comedy out of Glenda Farrell having to wash in a barrel and the sidekick gangster coming across her. And they each accuse each other of sexually harassing the other.
Yeah, it's true.
And you're honestly not sure. They were probably both sexually harassing each other. Even though she keeps crying that he should be arrested. But everyone tells her to shut up and go lie down.
It's true. There's not much sympathy extended to her in that scene.
And then she ends up sleeping with Frank McHugh that night.
Works out for them.
Yeah, he seems happy enough once he actually gives in.
And I guess she's the more likable one out of the two.
No,
because,
she's neither
well, Ruth
of them.
Donnelly is the one that's ranting about the Mexicans thieving her jewels, so that makes her less likable.
Well, it's only because she's not getting sex, so she's become very cranky, I think.
Well, possibly, yeah. They're bad.
What are their names? Feathers and Tinkle.
Oh,
so
man.
You really get the best and the worst of Warner's on gender all in one movie.
Yeah, you do. Things start moving inexorably towards disaster, and the movie does feel really tense. Even though it's got so much comedy relief in it.
It needs that much comedy relief, because from the very beginning, I thought that Olga was right about her sister, and there didn't seem, like I said, there's no alternative, so there doesn't seem to be any way out of this situation that's presented at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, again, it's done very economically. We don't see Ann Dvorak at the dance or what happens to her afterwards. We only see the good night.
This is actually done beautifully. From the good night through her sobbing in bed, it made me wonder if she had been raped.
Oh, yeah, I feel like yes.
You think she was raped?
And
even though she wouldn't call it that, the movie would definitely call it that. It's date rape. 'Cause
Yeah.
when they're saying goodnight in the car, she's trying
to make the best of it. Yeah,
she's trying to pretend like it was a loving, consensual encounter.
But it obviously wasn't. Yeah, and she's just saying, well, maybe if we act like it was, then it's okay, and we'll keep dating. But he's not even doing anything to help out with that. He's just done with her. It's so disgusting.
Apparently, yeah, he's not even going to try to do this again.
No, you just do it once and move on.
Well, obviously, because once she's had time to think about it, she's not going to be back for more. So
hopefully not.
Why be nice now?
Exactly. No, he's a really revolting monster.
Yeah, and it is done so economically. And actually, this movie, though, it was censored a couple of months after its release by the Catholic League of Decency.
Well, they were the people behind forcing the Hollywood studios to adopt the code. So this is pre-code, clearly.
It was banned by the Catholic League of Decency. Does that mean it would have to be taken out of circulation, or just Catholics couldn't see it?
Well, yeah. Catholics couldn't ban anything, except they could tell their parishioners not to see movies. And yes, that threat, though, the threat of a boycott by all Catholics, who were a majority of people in cities in the 1930s, was very frightening, and it led them to finally say, okay, we're really going to enforce the code. We're going to bring in a Catholic, who's going to look over these things and actually say, yes, this goes through, this doesn't.
It was banned not because it obliquely depicts date rape, but because of the sex out of wedlock.
A lot of things, though. It breaks the code in a lot of ways, right? Like, Lyle Talbot gets away.
Yeah, that's true, too.
That can't happen
That's amazing.
in a post-code enforcement era either.
And it didn't happen that much before.
No, but it was forbidden. In the code, if you commit a crime, you have to be punished for it. And in this movie, Aline MacMahon decides, no, this guy, yeah, he was part of a bank robbery, but he's not really morally responsible.
She knows.
Yeah, she does. She knows. She was listening into their conversation.
Oh, okay.
So she decides, no, he doesn't deserve to go to jail for this. He was just drawn astray by Preston Foster, so take off.
Or even if not, he at least didn't shoot anybody. So what does she care if he robbed a bank?
Well, no,
the depression.
Yeah, he did rob a bank, but yeah, she decides that's not a big deal.
Yeah. So then we get this final sequence, which is her last transformation from man to glam to femme fatale. She lets that raven hair down. She doesn't have raven hair in the other movie.
Well, she does. It just doesn't get shown to great effect, right?
I thought she might have had it dyed for this movie.
No, I don't think so. She's got the same hair in Gold Diggers of 1933.
All right.
But again, she deploys it very selectively.
She wakes up because her sister comes home.
Yep, and she goes in to see her. Now, again, she has abdicated this moral responsibility that she had taken upon herself to protect her sister, so she's feeling terrible about that.
And it's a pretty great scene where her sister lashes out at her because she's so upset by what's happened, but then they end up embracing.
Well, she's angry at Aline MacMahon for not stopping her now. And she's also feeling like she's been part of something that's immoral, and she hates herself, and she figures Aline MacMahon's going to hate her too for being a woman of loose virtue. And none of that happens. Obviously, they embrace, and that's how the sisters are going to relate.
She's also seen her sister, or seen this man come out of her sister's bedroom.
Yeah, but that's when she's angry at her. She's like, well, you were too busy having sex with your own boyfriend to stop this guy from raping me, and fuck you. But again, they resolve that.
They resolve it, but she puts her sister to bed, and her sister is still sobbing her
Well, of course, it's not going to fix her sister's life.
Yes.
I mean, she still had a terrible thing happen to her, but
grim.
she's at least in the care of someone who will understand and presumably be able to help her a little bit, but it's not going to happen all at once. And the movie doesn't pretend that that's something that you bounce back from immediately just with a pep talk.
Well, yeah, obviously. I'm just emphasizing what a bleak sequence it is.
It is very bleak, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. A lot of other movies might have found some way to make it all right by the end, but no, this movie does not.
And from that, Aline MacMahon steps out and sees that...
This robbery in progress.
What's his character's name, anyway?
George.
That George is about to rob her. Or, rob the guests and let them take the blame. I think she shoots him partly because of the heat of the moment of the betrayal, but also because she's thinking of him as the equivalent of this man who just raped her sister.
Absolutely.
He kind of almost... It's not quite fair more that she shoots him, even though it's satisfying.
He's got a gun, and he's already said that if he has to, he'll shoot anyone that gets in the way. So if she walks out with a gun, presumably he would have shot her if she hadn't shot him.
I guess. Yeah, and then they get this wonderful moment where she's leaning over him with her femme fatale hair.
She's not angry at him anymore.
She's just kind of in shock.
Yeah.
And then he gets his Only at Warner's speech, revealing that he's not such a bad guy after all.
I mean, he's behaved terribly throughout the film. He's a really hard-edged criminal, but he does have these strong feelings for her.
This is what he says. He says, you just looked out for yourself, which is what I've been doing all my life. So that's the Warner's ethos in a nutshell for their criminal characters, right? I've just been doing what I had to do all my life. I had to get ahead of the other guy and shoot before getting shot.
That's the position that capitalism puts us in, inevitably pitted against each other when we should be working together, yeah.
Then he starts to admit, that he has these feelings that seem more comradely than anything, but that's more than he's offered anybody else as far as we've seen.
No, well, that's the best of him, those feelings. Yeah, he really does care about her, but then he ends by saying, what does it matter? Or what's the difference? Is that what he says? Yeah.
Something like that.
It's pretty bleak.
No, he says, who cares?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. There you go. Even better.
Oh, who cares?
Yeah.
This just sums it up. It's even worse than the old man's final words in End of Summer.
No, this is one of the greatest death on the floor sequences I've ever seen. It's incredibly well written. It must be from the play. It just feels like it has to be.
At the end of both movies, I did cry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at these climaxes, which comes at the end of Side Streets, but at this point in this movie.
And Willard shows up, asks what's been going on, and Aline MacMahon says, well, there's a dead guy in there. Do you want to set things up so the police find out about what happened? And
before that, she gets her rat line, though, when the women come to check on the gunshot.
Yeah, I found a giant rat in there. Had to deal with it. Lyle Talbot escapes. We don't hear about him being apprehended, therefore he got away. He got to Mexico, and hopefully gets to live a better quality of life down there.
And the future for these women is now to just live sexless lives, running this gas station, and hopefully get some ethical joy out of customer service.
Well, they do. I think they will.
That's the best women can hope for in this world.
Yeah.
Or in that world, anyway.
Yeah.
In a lot of worlds.
That's what they're arguing. And it's not saying, this is necessarily a terrible thing. There could be a lot of fulfillment in it. So.
It's true. But also, it's very, very bleak.
Sure.
Both.
Yeah,
both are true. Gender relations just...
Well, they're very disappointing.
Just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The sexual relationships we do see in the movie are terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, even beyond the central character, the comic ones, terrible.
The only interaction that we see between men and women in the movie that are not just depressing as hell are the banter between the Hollywood-bound girls and the criminals at the beginning. That's just kind of fun. And the friendship that Aline MacMahon has with Willard Robertson. Do you recognize that actor?
No.
He's the attorney in Remember the Night who gives that speech about Barbara Stanwyck being hypnotized by the jewels. He was also a playwright. He's in I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang as well as like this big champion of the chain gang system. So he played a lot of different kind of roles.
But even he doesn't totally understand her because he's the one who pronounces her at the end to be a woman with no feelings.
I don't think that he understands her, but he's a friend, at least.
True.
That's all the movie has for her.
A sexless friend.
Yeah. So we've got a short letter from our friend Adam, who says, while watching Dead of Night, I was initially surprised that a game I had played growing up in Kansas was played in the 1940s in the UK. I was even more surprised listening to the podcast when I learned that you both hadn't played it growing up. I surveyed my friends, and we all played it growing up. Now I want a heat map of sardines usage through North America and Europe. Yeah, it's true. I only knew about it from this movie, and then I encountered it in my 30s when I was living in Vancouver, and I met some people that played it. It was a game they played growing up, but not me.
Adam, you didn't tell us if we were correct in our surmise that it was a way to get some cuddles in. with people that you had a crush on. Even the name of it sounds like obviously that would be what it was for. But I mean, I suppose prepubescent children could play it.
Well, yeah, that's...
Prepubescent children do chase each other and kiss each other.
Well, that's true. I certainly did have a little girlfriend when I was 7. I don't know if that's normal or not.
I think it's normal. I didn't, and I think that was abnormal.
Well, that's it for this week, I think. So next week, Elise, we're going to be doing your pick.
Oh.
Your little preview of Daniel Day-Lewis.
Wow, that was so long ago that I went on my Daniel Day-Lewis kick and decided to do this. But I'm sure I can get back in the spirit.
So we'll be talking about The Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson's film, which came out in 2017, and The Ballad of Jack and Rose from 2005.
I'm pretty sure Phantom Thread is by far the most recent movie we've ever done. I should be able to revive the thoughts I was having about The Phantom Thread at the time, and we should have. And the other one, I think it's probably an underseen movie that was directed by his wife, so I thought that would be an interesting pairing, because one is about... Oh yes, I remember why I decided to do it, because Daniel Day-Lewis starring in a movie written and directed by his wife, paired with a movie that's about a man, who's an artist who uses a woman as his muse in a marriage.
Yeah, I think there'll be all kinds of things for us to discuss there. I've never seen Ballad of Jack and Rose. You haven't either?
Nope.
So that one's going to be totally new to us, and we both, I'm sure, have a lot of things to say about Phantom Thread.
All right.
Again, if you have trouble finding Ballad of Jack and Rose, let us know. Phantom Thread should be readily available. I think we're going to
have to buy it.
Yeah, probably buy or rent, but it's on all the video on demand services, so
we won't help you if you're that helpless.
We'll see you very soon.